All right, everybody, welcome to Now That's Debatable, a very special edition indeed. We have, as you can see, not one but two guests. Today we're going to be talking about systemic racism in America. We have guest Tyrell and frequent recurring guest Morefreus is on with us. Tyrell's actually the owner and creator of Relic Media, who's been so kind to help kind of get us off of the zero views list. So if you want to go ahead and kind of tell us a little bit about what you do and a little bit about Relic Media, you're more than welcome to take it away. Then we'll kind of let Morpheus take over and give his kind of overview of the topic, and then we'll just kind of all jump in.
Cool. I'm going to keep it real short and sweet. Relic Media is a podcast network. We have about 7 podcasts. You can check us out on YouTube under Relic Media. We can go to relicmedia.com and get caught up with all of the latest episodes, and just a little bit of information on all of the podcasts that we have here. But that's about it. Just want to keep it short and sweet and get right to it.
All right, fair enough. Well, Morpheus, do you want to take us off in the argument, or True Lady, is there something you wanted to start us off with before we get into the discussion?
Well, I was going to get to what I had brought up a few weeks ago. I think it was the second episode that you were on. We were discussing about whether God was necessary for morality, or whether Americans need religion to be moral. And you had said something that I thought was problematic. But if you want to give a brief overview first, we can handle that later.
Yeah, I mean, we can cover that as well.
Okay.
I think, I guess we can start with that if you want.
Sure.
Let's try to just knock that out in a short period of time.
So you seem to have drawn this connection between a racially homogeneous society with government stability, right? I think you had talked. Cool. So I'll tell you. I'll try to jog your memory a little bit. So
you started off with talking about there being a God for morality. I think is what it was.
Yeah,
I was. Now we're switching to.
Well, yeah, I was just trying to jog your memory a little bit. So what happened? So we were talking about whether or not you need God for morals, and then I had pointed out how some the most moral societies in the world, the countries with the lowest crime rates, highest education rate, they're atheists, right? So no God needed. You can have a good society without it. And then you said that those countries were all white, as if that had some sort of connection.
Not white. I think the term I used was homogeneous, because that's a huge distinction.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, that's a big difference, because white sounds like I have a preference for a color, which I don't.
Okay,
but
that's fine. Yeah, I realized that because you talked about Japan too.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the Asian. Well, if you look historically, homogeneity is more common than heterogeneity. The United States and really Western Europe over the last, since the 21st century, is an experiment in heterogeneity. But I guess to go back to your original accusation, it's a complicated subject because it's not black or white, and I use that term in terms of binary 0 and 1. Of course, you can have an ethic and not believe in God.
No. So yeah, well, I just want to. So I don't want to go back to that. I was just talking about
in order to really understand the argument, the totality of we'll say proposition has to be taken into account. And so at the same time, I'm making 2 propositions.
Okay.
I'm saying that yes, it's possible you can have morality and an ethic without God, and I'm saying that no, I'm saying that many people struggle with that. That's the best way to put it. And I don't see evidence that we can. I don't see significant evidence that having no God leads to more moral actions or behaviors. In fact, I see there's a lot of evidence for the contrary. Okay. So that's the problem there, right? It's a complicated problem.
I think we're getting a little off topic. So I didn't want to go to about the morals without God.
Okay, got
I was talking specifically about the race thing. I was just trying to jog your memory.
Okay.
because we had gotten off topic on that,
Sorry
and then
about
we
that.
left. Yeah, we only talked there for a few minutes. Yeah, so so like country like Norway, like Japan, right? Like Sweden, right? Like historically low crime rates, historically high education rates,
Yes.
right? And you tied it to the fact that there was a
Homogeneity.
racially,
Yeah.
exactly.
It just
So I'm
means
trying
that there's, yeah. So, yeah. So I think that the claim I made was that when you look at the world,
Mhm.
some of the most prosperous countries happen to be some of the most homogeneous. That was the claim.
Yeah, and the most prosperous one, like of all, like is not very multicultural United States. But
No, that now when you say most prosperous, you have to qualify that. There's many
yeah, I was
things that
just
can be
talking about
prosperous.
yeah, I was talking about wealth.
So wealth is that's one thing. We're very, very low successful when it comes to crime, when it comes to social welfare, when
And
it comes to
do you
many
tie
things.
that to the fact that it is a multicultural society?
It's a correlation. I'm not necessarily saying it's a causation, but
Well,
I
if you
would
saying
say
it's just
that.
if you saying it's a correlation, I mean then
Well, I think
there's
it's
no we
something.
could have just there's another episode
Well,
of
I
another
mean,
topic.
it's hard to say that something's a causation.
Okay.
It's a variable to consider, and I think that the whole conversation goes back to. I mean, and to a certain degree, I feel like we should just define our terms, and I can define some of my baseline ideas when it comes to race.
Okay.
That's kind of why I know the episode's called Race and America,
Mhm.
and the question is, you know, to a large degree, like how many discussions have we seen really do a deep dive on race?
A lot.
Well, no, it sounds like we do, but we really don't.
Really?
In my opinion, we avoid a lot.
I
So
think you could click on YouTube and find a bunch of different discussions on race.
yeah, and guess what? They're all the same discussions. So let me just give you an example.
Okay.
Race is one variable in the richness of a human being's character.
Mhm.
There's so many variables to a human being. Think about it. Where you grew up, the choices you make, the people you love, the work you put into your day-to-day job, the work you
Mhm.
put in to the things that you strive for. How tall are you? How beautiful are you? Are you a male? Are you a female? Are you transgender? There's all these variables that we can look at, but for some reason we tend to have a bias for things that are immutable. We tend to have a bias for things that are not immutable. What is an immutable characteristic? It's something that we're born with, we can't change. And to judge people on immutable characteristics, in most cases, other than race, for some reason, is considered to be, extremely untasteful and unintellectual. Why? Because who cares if you have brown hair or a beard or you're Indian, you have brown skin or whatever. You have a big
So
nose.
sure. I
So
mean,
so so
I
so
think
let
just
me
about
finish my
everybody would
point though.
say okay.
Let me finish my point because we ignore all of those things and we focus on one variable, race.
Well,
Now,
not
now,
everybody, but okay.
well, I mean, I listen to NPR every day, but so anyway, the claim I'm making is that when it comes to race, or
Mhm.
when it comes to race, it tends to be a very shallow and unintellectual conversation that tends to be in an echo chamber that doesn't have anything to do with really the reality of the situation, in my opinion. There are some cases where it's relevant and necessary, but there are a lot of cases where it's not. So anyway, that's kind of how I understand race, and
Okay.
and maybe that's controversial, but I'll just put that out there.
No, I don't. I mean, I don't think that's controversial at all. I mean, I think pretty much everybody would agree that racism is a bad thing. But so, are you going back on what you said
No,
a few
I
weeks
did not
ago?
say so. Racism is a bad thing. It's a completely different subject. Of course, people think that racism is a bad thing. The
Okay.
issue is conflating racism with other things.
Like
When you
what?
only consider one variable, which is race, you're ignoring all the other variables that I just described. That's a problem, right? So
Mhm.
let me go back. Let me go back even further. Okay, why does race matter? Why does culture matter? Look at the historic implications of race and culture and values. These are
Mhm.
linked things, right? If you go back 1,000 years, when you talk about race, you're really talking about culture, nationality. When you go back 1,000 years, there wasn't if you were Japanese, you're
Yeah,
just
I agree. Like race is a concept that came about around like 700 years ago,
well, it starts
like
so race.
in a new world. But
But race starts to break apart when you move into modernity. Race starts to break apart from the correlate or the connection between culture and values, right? So, in other words, you can be an African American in the United States and really know nothing about African culture and really have nothing to do with anything African other than your DNA and your ancestry.
yeah, that's
And
me.
so culture and values start to then. So anyway, you have to take all these things in consideration because when you look at a heterogeneous society that's filled
Mhm.
with multi different races, multi different cultures,
Mhm.
and multiple, I'm sorry, multi sets of values associated with those cultures and races, and in the case you just pointed out, groups of people that are detached from that. You have to understand all of those connections in order to make statements and observations about society and the world, civic
Okay, so
duty, things like that. Sorry.
Morpheus, so what you're saying about like focusing on values and culture, right? So now are you going are you dropping the position that you held a few weeks ago? Because this is literally was my response to you. Because when you talked about uh racial homogeneous societies,
I asked.
and so what I pushed back was the race didn't matter. What mattered was the values. And we
So
were
sometimes the race matters.
it is the second episode that you were on.
Yeah. So I'll clarify those three things. Okay.
Okay.
The first two things is race does, and this is why this is so frustrating for so many people. They want an easy answer. There's not an easy answer. I'll give you two statements. Race matters and it doesn't matter. Okay. And I can
Okay.
explain
That
why.
doesn't make any sense, but okay, go ahead. That
Well,
is a logical contradiction.
it's not because it depends
It
on the
is.
context. It's not. It depends on the
Okay.
context, right?
You just said A and non-A. That's okay. Go ahead.
I know, but you really just have to take into consideration what I'm about to say here.
Okay.
I'll go through two scenarios, okay? And I'll stop, I'll pause, and I'll get your agreement on both, and then we can both agree that what I said wasn't illogical, although
Okay.
it sounds illogical,
Okay.
because they're in different layers and they're in different contexts.
But
If they were in
I
the
would,
same layer,
I would
then you'd be correct, but they're not.
sure.
So let
I'll-
me qualify.
So you were
Let me qualify.
equivocating. So okay,
No, I'm
but no,
about to explain the situation.
all right, sure.
But if
So,
I don't get a chance, then people
okay.
are not going to understand what I'm saying.
That's cool. But what I really wanted you to do was like on that statement that you had said when we were talking about Northern European countries, and then we talked about Japan, and you were saying like there gets some sort of benefit when it comes to political stability because there's mostly just one race there.
So
That's what I
before move
wanted to
on,
tackle. Uh-huh.
we can tackle that, but I
Okay,
don't want the
because
viewers to
you're
just
not
think
you're
I'm
not
being
getting to it.
illogical.
Okay.
Well, I want to finish this point because I don't want the viewers to sit there and say, "Oh, he's illogical." Let's
Okay.
not take anything he says into consideration. Are you saying that we can't find two different contexts in which race is and is not relevant?
You can do that, but that's just an equivocation. It's just going to cause confusion.
No,
Like
there's two different contexts.
okay. Well,
In some
I don't want
cases it does. In some cases
I
it
don't want to
doesn't.
make this like a lesson about communication. But if you say one thing and then say the logical negation of that, then there's a contradiction. They can't both be true.
Right,
So
but we both know that you can have different separate situations and contexts in which the qualifier will maintain the logical consistency between the two.
okay, that's what I was saying. It's equivocation. But that's what I really want to get to the point. Like let's not
Okay, anyway,
discuss like
well,
logic
all right.
here. Just
Okay,
I want,
all right.
yeah.
So you're talking about me get to the point?
Yes, when we're talking about Northern Europe, we're talking about Japan, right? You were saying that those countries had some sort of benefit because it was just one.
Oh
race.
yeah, homogeneity. So there was a study that was done in homogeneity. Basically, the outcome of that tended to be higher civic duty and less criminality.
Okay, what does race have to do with that?
Well, because homogeneity means that everyone's the same race.
Cool. So it seems like to me will be the important part
So, like
was the
Japan,
values.
for instance.
Yeah, I mean, so
because in different cultures, different races have different values. That's that simple.
Okay, but so then what matters is
the values culture. the values in Mogadishu are different than the values in Japan, which are different than the values in New
Sure.
York.
Okay, but there you talk about Mogadishu.
And then you can separate it into bureaus. You want to talk about Jewish values?
Sure. What is intrinsic to a Somalian skin for why someone from Mogadishu couldn't live
about
in
the
Tokyo?
skin, it's about the connection. That's why I went back to the history. See,
okay, so you're saying there's something. Okay, so
if
you're
I
saying
was given a lesson on this,
hold on, Kendall. So
start off.
All right, I was just looking for clarification here. So you're saying there is some intrinsic part of culture that is tied to their race.
See, there you go with the intrinsic word. If you look at the history of race,
well, that's what would matter. If it's not intrinsic, then there's not necessarily a connection. That someone from
doesn't
Mogadishu
have to necessarily be one. There could still be one.
Okay, so what is?
It doesn't necessitate it. It just means that it's enough, right? It's efficient. It's not necessary. Okay. And if you look historically, I mean, this should be common sense to everyone on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, your culture and your race were both of the same. So if you were Japanese, or if you were Moorish, or if you were Roman, for instance, you had a specific nationality or a specific race, and you had a specific culture, the values that were associated with that.
Mm-hmm.
You can find examples in history where that's not the case, but I'm just saying that, when you look at the historical progression of those things, in other words, if you look at a Muslim, if you took a Muslim, for instance, you would find an overlap of values along with race. Now, it's not going to be 100%, of course, but you're going to find a cultural similarity between anyone who's Muslim, and you're also going to find a predominance of a race. Now, that's a leftover of a long period that goes back, 500 years or what have you, or since the birth of Christ, basically. You're going to find a lineage.
All right. So how
Jews,
about this? Okay. So if you had
you can't separate the race and the culture always. You can sometimes.
Well,
but
it seemed like that they're, like, for instance, like a person in Japan is likely to have Japanese values and thereby be able to assimilate into Japanese society.
Yeah, 100%. And
sure.
the race would be Japan.
The race would be totally irrelevant if I grew up in Japan.
100%. No, it's not irrelevant. Anyone. So, if, in other words, so you can't break. You can't just break race from culture and values. There's a lot of cultures and values that are attached with race. Now you can point towards the 5,000 Americans that are there for expats.
So, no, hold on. I want to see if you can substantiate that point. So what part of culture or values is like part of my race? Like, what couldn't I break apart from?
You're an exception. You're an American. We're in a
so you can do it. All right.
I never said you can't.
No, that's what it
you
sounds
can roll
like.
the tape back. This is crazy.
Okay.
Literally, I said you can and you can't. I'm saying that when you look at the historical progression of the relationship between culture, values, and race, that they are connected. That's indisputable. I mean, that they're connected. I'm not saying that every single person. I'm just trying to figure out. I'll give you an example. I love Japan. I like to I follow some Japanese traditions. Yeah. But hey, I'm not Japanese. Okay, of course. But when you go to Japan and you don't say, hey, oh, you're Japanese, what race are you? No, you don't do that, because they're going to look at you like you're stupid. Okay, it's only in heterogeneous societies where you have multiple different cultures and races that may or may not overlap with their actual culture and race. But historically, that's always been the case.
Okay, but
if you look at America today,
that has nothing to do with the race. Like,
there's no correlation.
Here's the correlation.
You can be American.
I can tell you with the correlation. The correlation is that a person of Japanese descent is likely to grow up in Japan and adopt Japanese values. So, if I was
all connected. If we're in America, what are you going to say
to their race?
Yes, they're Japanese. The race. There's a correlation.
Okay, but hang on. So, as you're aware, since you said there's about 5,000 expats in Japan, right?
I just.
So you're aware of
but it's
Okay, it doesn't matter the number. really doesn't. If you're born and
Why?
raised in well, because of the point I'm about to make, you'll see why it's irrelevant.
Okay.
So if you're born and raised by a Japanese family who has traditional Japanese values, but your skin is jet black, do you think that person is going to have any different culture value than someone who was raised whose skin tone is that of the typical Japanese person?
This point has gone way over everyone's head,
No,
unfortunately.
I mean, it's not. This is a really simple question.
It's going away. Yeah, I know. You think I'm stupid? You think I don't
I mean,
know
you seem
black
like you're
people in
avoiding the
Japan
question, so I'm not
that
saying
have-
you're stupid. I'm saying you're avoiding the question.
No, because I'm not trying to
Well,
account
can you answer the
for
question,
every
please?
single human being.
Well, can you answer the question? That's all I'm
It's
asking for.
obviously yes.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the way that someone's raised and the culture in which they're raised impacts them more than the skin color.
So,
And
of
the
course,
instance I just gave you, skin color really didn't matter because the Japanese values and culture are going to far outweigh what that person looks like.
No, so you can, of course, you can be any race and be raised with Japanese culture and Japanese values. The point I'm trying to make is that there was a correlation, and still is in most cases, to race, culture, and values. That's it. That should be pretty simple, right? If you're Mexican and you're from a specific part of Mexico, those three things are going to align. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to. And I think that the point is we're looking at practicality here, right? We're looking at practicality. The question is, if a group of Muslims, let's say they're Afghanistan, let's say we go to Afghanistan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are their race, their culture, and their values, are they going to have any connection to each other?
I don't.
They're Afghani Muslim.
Well, I don't see what the race thing would matter. If you grow up in Afghanistan, then you're probably going to have Afghanistan culture and practice the predominant religion in Afghanistan, which is Sunni Islam. I don't know what the race has to do with this. It seems to me to be totally irrelevant.
It's a variable.
I got a question for you, Morefreus. I just want to make sure that I'm completely clear on something. Are you saying, and what I want to do is I want to simplify this right now. So are you saying that people turn issues into race issues when they're not really race issues? They are much bigger issues.
Thank you. Perfect.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that I understood exactly what you were saying.
So you're getting at the crux of the issue here.
Right. But now I want you to give me examples of that.
So examples of this was like, so Jewish people are stingy with money because, they happen to be, they happen to have a value towards education where they start at like age, whatever, 3, they have to learn Hebrew, a couple different languages, and they have to go through a bar mitzvah, and they have an extremely high value on education, and then they're demonized because they happen to have the most Nobel Prizes, for instance. But what they do is they conflate that with Jews being stingy, and there's the whole joke about Jews wanting money and being stingy and that sort of thing, and they're conflating that with being Jewish. The reality is that Jewish people have values and they have a culture, and the outcome of those values and culture happen to be extreme wealth and education, as displayed in the amount of Nobel Prize winners by Jews. That's just an example of one. Does that make sense?
That example does.
Yeah.
I'm wondering.
But the Jewish person's race has little to do with that. What mattered was their values and their culture.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is that you can't. Hold
on. So if you take somebody Somalian from Mogadishu and put them in that Jewish culture where they value education and success.
Yeah.
The outcome should be the same, right?
Of course. Yes.
Okay, so that's the point that I was trying to make. It seems like the race thing was totally irrelevant, and now it seems like you're kind of demonstrating that.
No, I'm just saying
that's the only thing that I was trying to get to.
I thought from the beginning. I said race and you stopped me. You said, well, we don't want to go down this track. I said, race is and is not. Okay. It is in the sense that you can point towards race and look at a specific set of values, but it's not in the sense that you don't have to point towards race. Do you understand? Do you follow my logic there? You could say, hey,
I don't.
most
I actually,
Japanese people.
Can I pause you there for a second? Because I don't want to misquote you or mischaracterize you. I just want you to clarify something you just said. Did you just say you could point to a race and extrapolate their values?
Yes, you could make a general assumption on a race's values.
Okay. So do you have like any negative opinion of any white person? Or any like subgenre of white people?
Yeah,
since
yeah.
There's,
yeah.
You know, there's like Europeans, and then there's
tons. Well,
like
I wouldn't.
Current
Europeans
Americans.
a very broad statement.
I'm
Yeah,
aware,
I wouldn't
but
go
like
with
Russians, like would also be
Well-
very white.
Well, yeah, no. There are certain groups of white people that have certain cultures and values. And
So you're saying
that's
it's more of a
is that not
culture thing, not a race thing, because like you would say, my culture is much different than like a very Eastern European culture.
there are multi different.
But we're the
Well,
same
yeah,
race.
that's why I don't like using the word white, because it's so general. Like,
I mean,
there's
how would you
tons of
define
different.
me, given I'm, pale as the snow background?
Well, I would just ask you what's your ancestry.
I would just say I'm white.
You know?
I don't know.
Of course, because that's what people do today. They just say, "Hey, I'm just brown." Okay, well, I thought we care about culture and values here. It's
Well,
more
I mean,
to that.
like,
It's more to that.
It seems like you're trying to assign the two to a
Well,
particular
no, I mean
color.
you can. I would say I would say each human being is cultural. I mean, I would say that each human being is very complicated in many ways, but at the same time, you can still observe generalities, right? There's general values.
So what generic thing can you make about white people? Because like there's
white
there's
people is
white
nothing.
people that are born in the United States
That
today that were like
white people doesn't tell me anything.
If
you tell me you're Irish, you're probably
European
Catholic.
descendants, does that
If you
help?
tell me you're evangelical white, then I know you have a certain set of values. If you tell me you're Mormon,
I only have
I
only have the values of the evangelical part. I don't have them because I'm white. But you said that you could extrapolate someone's culture based off of their race. So I'm curious, what specifically can you extrapolate based on a race? Because I'm giving you the example of white people. I'll even say European descent.
Because
does that tell you anything about my culture?
Because you're asking me in 2023. The examples I gave were historical progression.
In 2023, I don't see what that has to do with anything. You're the one
because
that
history matters. History matters. That's why.
Like 10 seconds ago, you said that you could extrapolate a culture about a race. I'm telling
cultures
you that
have values. Is this a crazy proposition?
I'm not saying that. I'm just
you're funny. So, it's funny. It's like as if culture and values and race don't it's like they don't overlap at all.
I'm just wondering what you could extrapolate given my race.
Here's the thing. Like, I wasn't saying that they didn't overlap. Like, obviously they do. Like people in Japan are mostly Japanese.
I'm saying we can't.
And so they mostly have Japanese. But I just don't see how the race part was relevant.
I'm saying we can't ignore the conversation. I'm not saying it's 100% true or anything like that. But I don't ever hear that conversation. We don't ever talk about culture and values and how it affects policy and how it affects decisions and how it affects.
Yeah, that too. I mean, the culture.
We don't talk about that.
I don't know how. I don't know how talking about race it helps the conversation. I don't see how it pushes it forward. Like, because we could just talk about, so like you say, let's say there's a group of people who commonly engage in destructive behavior. And so now we can engage that culture, right? You say, hey, it's part of your culture to do this destructive thing and do this bad thing. We should stop doing that.
So
right?
Like Muslims in Afghanistan, for instance, that do like really horrible things.
Cool. So, yes, that's
How do you talk about culture that happens to be from it's Islamic
hold on,
from the
Quran?
And
seriously, no. Listen, we could definitely talk about culture, talk about the religion, and all of that. I don't see what addressing their race does. I don't know what that has to do with anything.
It's just a correlation in some cases. That's it. It's not important.
Okay, so
to 100% agree.
so I'll tell you this. So like when we start adding in,
It's so funny we don't talk about race.
Hold on,
in this conversation.
Here's the thing.
Talked about every day.
Hold on, because here's the thing. When we started adding irrelevancies to already complicated issues, especially irrelevant things like
it's
race,
irrelevant.
I mean, it becomes suspicious.
How many times in our society in America we've used race to justify so many things? But the second I don't know, but the second I want to dive deeper, the second I want to dive deeper past race into culture, into values, I'm the crazy person. But we can use it for any study.
No, the problem was the problem is you were pulling race into it, and I just didn't see why you were doing it. It's the same thing for Silas. Like, why are you pulling race into it?
Because there's a correlation between race, culture, and values.
So how about that?
My point is,
okay, so let's talk about.
Can you explain the correlation between culture and race? Because, like, again, I'm still completely lost on how you said.
Have you ever heard of Japanese culture?
Can I finish my thought? Yes, I probably know better than you do. I'm not trying to be rude here, but I've read several dozen books on Japanese culture from literally their iteration as a country till today.
What's Japanese? Is it a race? Is it not a race?
Well, Japan is a country. Japanese is a term we use to refer to the people that are born there. More importantly, you would say that typically race, since it's a concept, you'd probably say they're Asian. But we could go there if you really
Asian's
wanted to get into
term.
it. I'm well aware, but you're defining a country, not a specific race.
Yeah, because for some countries, when you go there and you ask them what their race is, they'll stare at you like you're stupid because their race is their nationality.
Okay, more.
I bet you if you asked that question to like an African American in Japan, you wouldn't get a stupid answer.
If I asked an African American in Japan, is he Japanese? That's a complicated question actually. Because technically they're
not really, because you'd be like, oh, was I born or do I identify as a Japanese person?
So hey,
like that pretty much ends up like bada bing, bada boom. Like that's pretty
so we don't care about ethnicity and genealogy.
Hold on. Hey, guys, let's talk about this. Let's talk about like a problematic country like Iran, right? Okay, so the government is very intrusive. Like they supposedly have a constitutional republic, but there's an ayatollah that runs everything, right? And they're also hardcore Shia Muslims, right? Now, let's say we were trying to fix that country. Mm-hmm. Now, tell me, how would it help to address the Iranians as a race? So, how would bringing race into this help them? Like, I can see how bringing culture into it, religion into it, values into it, ethics. What I want to know is how would bringing up race help with this specific country, Iran? Hello.
I guess I would answer that by saying if you're Iranian, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're from Iran,
yep.
the assumption is that you have a set of values, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm assuming Iranians, the race of Iranians is Iranian.
Yep.
Right? I mean.
Yep. They're Iranian. They're not Arab. Yep.
So I mean, if I saw Iranian, I wouldn't say, oh, they have Scandinavian values.
Mm-hmm. No. I'm saying like I'm talking about like.
I'm gonna look at the I'm gonna look at the geopolitics of Iran.
Yeah, that's good.
At the culture and the values.
That's good.
But guess what? If I just said, it's a person in the Middle East, you have to qualify it by something. You can qualify it by religion. You can qualify it by race. I'm just saying.
What I'm talking about is how we can address culture, we can address religion, we can address value and ethics and all that type of stuff.
So why don't we do that?
When we address race
in America, let's just go with
does
values.
that help? Like, what does it do? What I'm asking is,
let's do that in America. That's a great experiment. No race. Let's never talk about race. Let's only do values. That's a great proposition. I'm right there with you.
Okay, so you're shadow boxing.
No,
I didn't say let's not talk about race.
You said, why does race matter?
No, that's not what I said. What I said is, how does addressing race help forward the conversation?
I'm not addressing. I was talking about.
So when I was talking about, hold on, we were talking about we're talking about Iran. I wanted to get very specific.
Yeah,
I wanted to
giving
get
you
to a
examples.
very problematic country with very like.
Yeah, you
problematic-
never
when
just go in there and attack race. That has nothing to do with it.
No. What I'm asking, I want to know how, in any remote way, like how will talking about race, like help them just like a little, just like even a little more.
First of all, it's respectful, right? Second of all, it's a matter of paying homage to their ancestry and who they
Okay,
are.
so how about this? How about this? So like, so
But
okay,
but no,
no,
your
no,
example
no.
just blows my mind.
I want to try
It
to.
blows my mind that the arguments you're making right now, because in the context of America, it would be laughable to say that. In a
Because-
university, it would be laughable.
We're not talking about
Abraham
America.
Kennedy would
We're
laugh
not
at you.
talking about America. We're talking about Iran.
Oh,
That's
so-
what I was trying to get
So
very.
we want to be specific in other contexts and ignore the American context.
We were specific with Northern Europe. We were specific with Japan. So no, here's the thing. I'm trying
Korea?
to figure out. Yeah, Korea, sure. What I'm trying to figure out is how would addressing race help. And then you diverge into we talk about race in the United States. Like I don't care about that. What I'm trying to figure out is somehow you think that addressing
What race is a Korean?
I don't know how that has anything to do with,
because they're a homogeneous society. That's the point. Their race, their values, their culture, they're the same thing.
okay,
And historically speaking, that was
Mhm.
always the case. Now you can point to 2023 in Arkansas.
Hey, Morefreeus, I don't think you're listening to what I'm saying, because that had nothing to do with anything that I said.
So I'd also
Right.
like to point out, like,
Sure.
what's your point just by saying that they're a homogeneous society, given that Korea is one of the most divided countries in the world currently? But I mean, I guess we could take that as a different point. But
Well, because societies evolved to be homogeneous in history at some point. Someone had to kill off all the other people.
Not all societies, as pointed out by the United States.
Some.
and
I said
several others.
some.
Okay, but okay.
And I
So what
also
is the
pointed out that in the
benefit or
21st
the,
century? This is a historical
Would you
experiment
s-
towards
would you-
heterogeneity.
So would you say it's a benefit or a negative to have a
Right now-
homogeneous society?
It depends on what you're asking. If you're asking about civic
in
duty,
generic
if you're-
concept.
no, I'll give you two specific examples. If you're a homogeneous society, you're going to have an increase in civic duty. If you're a heterogeneous society, depending on
what type of homogeneous? Tell me, racious, like racially homogeneous.
that's the only type I've ever known.
Okay, that's
homogeneous in terms of race. Yes.
Okay, that's what
the
I thought
same
you were talking about.
people.
Cool. So,
Studies have been done. If it's a homogeneous society like Japan,
I like to see the study, because it seems to me,
Oh yeah, I can give you the study.
because all they're doing is drawing a correlation. Because like
I'm just giving you an
because, like,
example. He asked for an example. I gave it to you.
But what would matter is the values.
I'd actually like to hear the actual example, because so far you've said that potential civic duty.
Not potential. Civic duty in general. So when you have a homogeneous society, the amount of cooperation and civic cooperation in Japan, for instance, which is a homogeneous society, and the study was done with multiple different homogeneous and heterogeneous, right? When you have a heterogeneous society, you're moving towards tribalism in a lot of ways. That's why it's very dangerous in America to talk about to target.
I guess you're unaware of, like, literally a third of the Japanese people who would say that literally the rest of Japan are not truly Japanese people. They have one of the biggest divides in the world as far as being racist towards their own people. And literally the people that have been there, for historic purposes, as long as humanity has existed, basically have extreme grief and discourse towards people that have been born there in the past 50 or 60 years, given they've taken on more Western views, or at least more modern views that don't necessarily assign and align with previous historical Japanese function. So you're aware that Japan, quite literally, if they weren't so old, would probably go into civil war because of the people that have held this value, right? And I that's why I thought that was kind of odd that you used them as a specific example, because quite literally, if you asked about a third of the population, they would say
I used the study as an example. It has nothing to do with my preference. It just has to do with the study. Now,
okay, so was the study unaware of this, or is it just something they just ignored, or how would you personally address this?
We can always go back
to. You said you studied Japan, so you're aware that this is the situation.
Not that I studied Japan. I lived there, and I
And you're
experienced the
aware
culture
that like you would
firsthand.
be an outcast till like the day you die, till about a third of the population.
Yeah, because they're extremely racist there. That's
Right, but
another
they're
point that
racist
haven't
towards
been
their own
brought up.
people.
No, they're racist towards everyone that's not Japanese.
Well, I mean, that's kind of goes to further my point. There's literally about
Which
a
is
third
funny
of the
because
population
the
that would
United
say that
States,
like
which is
people
the
that have
least
been born
racist
in the past
country,
60 years aren't
because
even
we're
Japanese.
heterogeneous and we have multiple diversity of
I guess you're
peoples
just going
in
to
our
talk over me.
political
That's
powers.
fine. I mean, I just wanted to make a point.
Well, no,
but
because
yeah.
you're saying when you get to the point where you say the study's wrong, there's nothing I can do.
I didn't say the study was wrong. I asked your opinion on something. That was it. If you would just stop talking, you could have answered that.
I don't know if they took into account the Okinawans, for instance, that were considered second-class citizens. I don't know if they took that into account in their study. But
I didn't ask
this
if
was
they took
about
into
civic
account in their
duty.
study, but you haven't listened, so you're not responding to what I'm asking. You're doing the same thing with AAA earlier. You're not responding to what he's saying because you're formulating an argument before he speaks. That's the problem we're having in this conversation so far, is that AAA will ask you something, and then you'll respond. He'll ask you, what does this have to do with this one thing? Or what is Iran specifically? How do we solve this problem in Iran? And you say, what is the race of a South Korean? I don't understand what these two things are related. If I ask you what color is the sky, and you say, I have a pet dog, these two things couldn't be further from the whole point.
No.
If I responded the way you did to you, we would make no progress on this conversation.
Well, no, because I'm responding for a reason. I'm not saying something for no reason.
All right, check this out. Check this out. So you have two societies, right? All right. Both societies have the same values, right? Practice the same religion, right? Same ethics and everything, right? This one has all one race. This one, it's a bunch of different races. Every single person is a different race or something like that. Just like 50, I don't know, whatever mix. So what benefit does the racially homogeneous one have against the other one?
Nothing.
Okay. So let's say this. Okay, let's say this. All right. Now
that's not reality. But
no.
Hold
on. Okay, so let's say you have a society, right? Everybody over here is the same race, but you have Christians, you have Muslims, you have secular humanists, Buddhists, and all that type of stuff with vastly different values, right? But they're all the same race. This one have the same values, right? Everybody here is secular humanists, but they're different races. Which one is going to have more stability?
The one that's different races with the same values.
Okay, so it seems like race.
You didn't include the third example, though.
What would be the third? What would be the third example?
You left out the exact proposition that I brought up, which is a heterogeneous society with different values versus a homogeneous society with the same values. Now that's a much different conclusion than your second point.
Here's the thing. This is the point I was trying to get to. So
and you avoided that.
The values is what matters. So like, because if you had a society, if you had a society,
we're tribal. Have you ever studied primatology? We're very tribal, and I know that Fantastic Facade is going to say, "Well, why would you bring that up? This is a completely different subject." No, it's not a completely different subject. Well, they're interrelated.
I don't think he was going to say that, but anyway, so
primates have color vision.
Sure.
And chimpanzees, if you study primatology, are extremely primate.
Okay, so like tribalism.
Tribal.
Here's the thing: tribalism is a value, right? So
tribalism is a biological predisposition.
No,
it's not a value.
It is. That is a part.
It's a biological.
No, it is a value. It's something that people value.
No. Chimpanzees.
Yes.
So you're telling me chimpanzees have values because they're more tribal than
yes, because chimpanzees have values. They punish people for lying so they can get more food.
It's a biological predisposition.
No. You're wrong. It is a fact that chimpanzees have values. They have their own moral system. It's something that I say to Christians all the time when they say that God like wrote this stuff in our heart or something like that.
So it has nothing to do with biology. It's just they came together and said,
values come about by
come here.
Where are you
We're
going?
To come up with a decision. So we want to have a value.
You're shadow boxing. I didn't say that values don't have any sort of biological connection. Of course they do.
Of course they do. Yeah.
Yeah, but the
But
point I
what we
was
call
making,
values is a biological predisposition.
okay, so no,
that
here's the thing.
chimpanzees don't
No,
abuse.
when you were talking about were you talking about tribalism, that is a value.
Yes.
That is something that a lot of
I
people hold dear to them.
I don't think that's a
So
value.
that is going to
mean,
divide
but
people.
we can
No,
have
hold
that
on,
discussion.
No, are you when you saying it's not a value? Are you saying it's not a good thing? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that. So if you define value as just a choice, then it's a value. But to me,
I say
tribalism is a biological predisposition. When
So-
chimpanzees are born
okay.
into their
For the way that I'm sounding value, I think value is something that people hold important to them.
that's
Right.
not how I define it.
Okay, well,
Yeah, to me, a value is a choice. A lot of
Okay,
people
well,
they
that-
have something important in their mind, but they choose something different. I say that's a value. I don't care what you say you value
okay,
because that
I
means
don't
nothing to me.
I don't think most people define value as
That's just my
choice.
definition, but that's fine.
Okay, so you had an esoteric definition of that.
That's just my definition.
Okay,
Because
okay.
a lot of people have a contradiction between what they say they value and what they do.
You,
What you value is your choice. I don't care what you say you value because
no.
that's just an ideal.
So there was somewhere else I wanted to go as well. So you had it sounded like you had said
We talked about primatology, but specifically tribalism within chimpanzees, which is our closest relative, and how heterogeneity tends to fall to tribalism, which is why historically there's a progression towards homogeneity, which is why in the United States we have to be very careful about looking at people's skin color because that's very dangerous and it can lead us to tribalism, which I don't like.
Sure. So
hey, hold on. Hey, I want to ask a question. I want to make sure that I heard you right, Morpheus. Did you say earlier that America is the least racist country?
This is going to sound crazy, but hear me out, okay? It takes diversity to be racist, okay? It takes heterogeneity to be racist. When you have a country full of the same people, you don't really have racism at that point. You have classism, you can look at people's class and maybe attributes, different characteristics, and judge people and oppress people by that. But only when it comes to the point where you have a multicultural union of diverse peoples can you really be racist, because it has to be based on a race.
So you think we're all the same here in America?
No, we're not all the same. We're pockets. In America, we have pockets of different ethnicities, cultures, and values, and that's why racism it exists in America. Right? That's why racists exist from the very beginning, because we're a melting pot. It's prime territory for racism, because in America, yeah.
So okay, so you're not saying that it's the least racist?
No. So let me clarify this, because this is a kind of complicated point here. In 2023, right, when you look at people in positions of power, America is one of the least racist countries, and the reason why is because when you look at other countries, there's no other races. It's completely it's as if, just imagine white supremacy. Imagine Germany won, and everyone in their positions of power happened to be German, right? Isn't that extremely racist? I know that there's no other races being oppressed. That's because they all got rid of them all. In America, racism is a product of our diverse culture that's filled with different pockets of races. And so in a sense, racism is a natural byproduct of the most non-racist country. Because if you were extremely racist, like Japan, like Korea, and I'll say that even though I love those countries, they're extremely racist because there's no people in positions of power that are of any other race than Japanese. And to me, it blows my mind that no one's considered this point. I mean, some people have, but I mean, there are countries where there's zero people in power of any other race or culture. When you look at America, we've got all kinds of races and cultures and positions of power. And so, yes, of course we have racism in America. Of course we have historical racism, but you're going to have that if you want to go and play with the big dogs and have a completely heterogeneous society, have all cultures and all races in your society. You better be prepared for racism, because it's going to happen, because we're tribal primates.
Why can't it be that two things can be true? I mean, yes, those countries can be racist because there's pretty much they wiped out all the other races. That's what you're saying, right? There are no other races. There's just this one race there,
in positions of power, correct? Yeah.
right, in positions of power. But here, racism, it still exists because there are all of these different races, and then there are people who are oppressed. The playing field isn't level, and it hasn't been level, and it's never been level
In the United States.
So, right. So how is it?
I could point to examples where the playing field's not level for white people.
Oh,
I know that.
Let's do that.
By all means.
I'll just give you an example. I mean, there was a study recently done where a similar student of Asian or white descent would need like a 56% higher score on their SAT to get into a university over a minority black person, for instance. That's a systemic example.
Did you say Asian or white?
I think it's different for Asian or white people, but they're both at a disadvantage due to their skin color. So that's just one example, right? But
what universities are you talking about?
Mainly Ivy League. So I'm talking about Harvard, the best universities in America. So Harvard, Yale, Columbia. It's mainly the lawsuits with Harvard, though. But that's just one example. I mean,
those are all Asians, though. I don't remember whites being a part of that.
It's a subset.
I'm very familiar with what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a subset.
Like all Asian.
It's not just Asian. It's white people. Both are at a disadvantage. And so when I say disadvantage, I mean based off of their SAT score. Tyrell, if you've never heard this before, I can send you the study and the relevant material on that. But
yeah,
I'm just giving you one example of the contrary.
What are the numbers as far as the ratio of black people or African Americans to white in those Ivy League colleges?
So I don't know the ratios in those Ivy League colleges, but you would have to look at the proportion of folks that meet the standards. Then you'd have to look at the proportion of folks that exist in the United States, right? So white people, they make up majority. I think it's like over 74% or something of the population. And so what you're seeing now is a direct discriminatory act towards races, specifically of Asian and white descent, in order to skew those numbers to make the proportions higher in favor or.
So I can tell you what was going on. So those
and I can
schools,
show you all the materials.
Those schools have quotas. So like they want a certain amount of Asians, certain amount of black people, certain amount of Latinos, and et cetera, right? And so Asians, they do really well in the scores, right? And so a lot of them do well enough to get into the school, way more than the quota. So they're having to compete against each other for those same slots. Like that's kind of what was going on. So imagine if the NBA had a quota, right? There was only a certain amount of black people and a certain amount of white people, a certain amount of Asians, right? So the skill level, the skill level for certain people, it'd be much lower than it would be for like black people, right? Because there's a NBA is like mostly black, right? So
mostly is an understatement, but it's extremely. Well,
yeah,
so
you have like a higher amount of talent, like competing for the same number of seats. That's essentially what's going on.
I'm all about meritocracy.
I think I'm all about freedom. I think the schools, this is a private institution, should be able to run their enrollment however they want. But
if you would have said that in the 60s, you'd been a racist. You understand what I'm saying, right? If you were to defend the racist in the 60s because of their admission process, well, sure. It's a free university. But if Alabama doesn't want to bring in any black people, who cares? It's their choice. That's a horrible excuse.
Sure. So I thought this was interesting. So Tyrell had talked about how the playing field had never been empty. And then you immediately went to, well, I could show you where white people are discriminated against.
Yeah, so because it's something that's not talked about.
How's that discrimination?
Well, it's not only discrimination; it's systemic racism. But to your, let me go back and answer your initial question.
It is not discrimination. It's just it's a larger portion of SATs of high scoring SAT.
If it's not discriminatory, our
definition. It's not. So it's just more people fighting for the same amount of seats. That's what's
and I think the more important question here is, who made that rule? Was it white people? Because if white people made that rule for white people, then that eliminates us. We didn't make that decision.
Well, no, I would never judge. No, I would never judge, the minority community because of a policy written by white people at Harvard University. I would never do
Right.
that. And also,
So
of
white
course,
people are discriminating against white people. Is what you're saying?
basically, yeah, and white and Asian,
Well,
people.
Asian.
Mainly Asian, mainly,
Asian.
It's almost entirely Asian.
It's Asian and white's a subset of that.
Given
So
that
you have to
can
understand.
easily
All
Google
right.
this, the answer is 28% of Asians is the current population of Harvard. Just wanted to throw that out there because you can just 2-second Google that. 28% of the population of Harvard right now is Asian. So, in an attempt to diversify their student body, they reduce the number of applicants accepted into the school strictly based on the SAT score, given the number of qualified Asian applicants. That's
Yeah,
pretty,
I
pretty
think
easy
just
to.
if I think
So,
you should.
so is
I think
is
you
it
should
a
have a standard.
discrimination? Is it a discrimination issue, or is it a we have to meet a quota issue?
I mean, the quota is discrimination, in my opinion. Either you meet the standard or you don't, and it shouldn't have to do with immutable characteristics. I shouldn't say, "All right, hey, here's the standard, but if you have brown hair, you're going to have a 3% advantage." It should be, this is the score that you need, and you know what I mean. It can't be. It needs to be quantifiable. I think if you start dealing with qualifiable things, especially race, to me, that's not you're not getting. You're not going towards the right direction, in my
But
opinion.
see, it's not an apples to apples comparison. If we're talking about white people discriminating against white people, and then we talk about the Asian companies, Asian countries where they have discriminated against other races. That's not an apples to apples comparison there.
Yeah, I also
I
want
don't
to point
think I
out
would
that,
make
like,
that.
it's not that, like, for instance, the people of a different race didn't meet the minimum requirements and got accepted anyway. It's just that they accepted fewer Asians.
No, it has to
In the
do. I saw the
process.
breakdown. No, I saw the breakdown. I can send you the data. If the breakdown showed that you could have a lower SAT score if you were black versus an Asian. So basically, because of your skin color, you got an advantage because you were allowed in with a lower SAT score. That's common knowledge.
Let me point out
But,
one thing
but
really quick
white
for you.
people did that. White
Sure,
people did that.
But
yeah,
That's
you're
your
right.
point.
White
I
people did
Like,
that.
yes, white people did that, but B, it didn't change the lower minimum qualifications. They just took fewer Asians because, like, just so you're aware, like, you know, I say I'm only going to allow 10,000 people into the school, and I want it to be a diverse school. If I just accepted every Asian in this instance that applied, I could easily fill up the 10,000 people roster, given that more than 10,000 people probably met the minimum requirement. Would you say the school is then being racist for only accepting Asian applicants because maybe they applied first and they met the minimum requirement? You see what I'm saying? Like, it gets a little more complicated than you just saying there's a difference
I
in
didn't.
equality based off of skin color.
I didn't say that. I talked about the variation of SAT score. So the study that I saw showed the variation between black and Asian SAT scores and what you had to get in as an Asian. You had to get like a large percentage higher. So let's just say
Are you
you're
saying
black,
what
right?
people were accepted or what was the minimum requirement? Because those are two different
I'm saying
questions.
that if you were an Asian, let's just say that 100 is the standard, right? If you were an Asian, let me re-clarify that 100 is the perfect score. If you were an Asian, you needed like an 85, but if you were black, you could get in at 75. That was the statistics that I saw. Not that exact statistic. I'm saying that it's similar to that. So you had to have a higher score no matter what to get in as an Asian because there's just so many Asians that have high SAT scores. So to meet their quotas, they had to discriminate against black people in order to let Asians in. And those black people, some of them had much lower scores than their Asian counterparts.
I thought you said
That's
they were
just
discriminating against white people.
I think he just
white.
misspoke.
No. There's two categories. Then you can look at the statistics for white people. So you can see, okay, a white person needed this SAT score minimally to get in, and then you can look at the black counterpart, and you can do that for both. And like I said, I'm more than happy to send it to you. You can debunk it. It could be false. I don't know. Right? It's just a study I saw, but I've seen it, and and there's a lawsuit, and I've seen many different articles and things like that written on it. And so, but anyway, but
So,
besides all that stuff,
I got a
Tyrell, to
question.
get to your
So-
point.
Okay.
Let me just get to Tyrell's point. Of course, there's been. I mean, America is there's so many cases in America of racism and oppression, and you know, everything from the Japanese in World War II, the Chinese and the building of the railroads, the African Americans and the slave trade. Of course, there's a whole history. That's kind of my whole point, is that you risk running that fact when you're trying to be a diverse, heterogeneous society. Is that when you have a bunch of groups of different people, there's going to be tribalism because that's in our nature. So we have to be very careful about what we say is racist, because it seems to me that everything is painted as racist these days, even though a lot of times it's just a disproportionate outcome.
Give me an example.
And who said that?
AAA. I did.
Oh, so an example would be to say that. So specifically, when it comes to
Something.
Blank-
Give me
I'm
something. It's a
blanking.
lot, right? Yeah.
no.
Plenty of
Well,
examples,
no.
right?
I'm saying that, like, for instance, to say that I'm trying to just think of.
Okay,
some
what
stuff.
about like income? Like, could that be?
Well. So the issues I have here is that, like, it's easy to see a disproportionate outcome of, say, Black people, but that doesn't mean that it was racist, right? Like, there's so many other variables.
Give me some sort of disproportionality that people categorize as racist that is not racist. That's what I want. I just want to get specific. That way we can deal with something. Yeah.
Well,
we're in like generalities right now. We're so broad.
Yeah, that's true.
Give me some specific.
Let me think here. Well, like critical race theory, for instance, we'll look at the outcome of a specific illegal policy or a specific law, and they'll see in that law that there's a higher proportion of Black people, and then they'll say, well, that law is racist.
Well, sure, yeah, shit. Okay,
yeah, because,
so do you think the law has to like explicitly say, like, describe race in order for it to be racist?
Well, in order for someone to be culpable, they have to have intentionality of racism.
No, not
so
at all.
No.
If be culpable with a lot of things.
If there's a disparity of race, right? For instance, you could look at the outcome of the Biden law that had to do with crack cocaine, for instance, and you could look at the proportion of white people to Black people, and you might see a large proportion of Black people, but then you'd have to conclude that the people who wrote that law intentionally thought that Black people were.
No, you don't. It does not have to be intentional at all. That's the thing.
Then how do you hold people culpable?
So why do
we care about culpability? If I hit you with my car, I'm not culpable.
Yes,
that's
you
a different
are.
Degree of
yes,
murder.
you are. Yes, you
then
are.
Why do they have different degrees of murder? Because intentionality matters.
Hold on.
If I come to your house,
hold on. You're conflating a lot of different things here.
First of
all, so when we talk about systemic racism, right? So a law can be racist, right? Without the legislators having some sort of racial intent.
Let's start with the beginning. How do you define racism?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on what context.
Because I can tell you the traditional definition.
It depends on what.
And people hate it because
it depends. It depends on the context. So, like, but if racism is stop. Racism is just a form of collectivism that targets race.
Here we go.
I'm wrong about that. Racism is not a form of collectivism.
I've seen about 3 or 4 different definitions since like 20.
Let's get back on topic. So we were talking about like, does a law have to mention the race in order for it to be racist?
So in order for racism to exist, and this is my definition, we can disagree on this. I'm okay with that, but at least hear me out. In order to be racist, I gotta think that a race is inferior to me.
You're an agent. So that's not what we're talking about. You're an agent. What we're talking about
who writes laws?
Legislators
agents write laws.
Yes, agents write laws.
It's not a computer.
A non-racist agent can write a law that has their racist.
So you're telling me? So no, you have to have an intentional. There's so many racist laws that were written before the Civil Act, right? That you can point towards systemic racism. Now we're past the Civil Acts, right? You have to prove.
Hold on. No. First of all, like I mean, have you done any like research on the Federal Housing Authority? And did you see
talking about redlining?
Yeah, like all of that stuff.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So like
But
like
you have to prove it.
No, stop. We don't have to prove it. Like this free documentation.
So no proof. We can just indict anyone. Who cares about the rule of law? We don't care.
Hold on.
People...
I don't know what the stop. I don't even know where you're going right now. So what I'm saying
is called the rule of law. And proving intentionality.
Okay,
you can't just accuse someone of racism if they're not.
Listen. So we're talking about the Federal Housing Authority, right? So we could talk about the GI Bill. We can talk about like the Homestead Act, where people was able to go out west and gather all this wealth with land and stuff, and able to pass it on to their children. Black people were completely excluded from that. The benefits that we got from GI Bill, Black people were excluded from that. We talk about like houses, right? So they were using money that Black people were getting taxed for. Like Black people were still paying taxes, right? My grandparents and great grandparents.
I wonder how they
were still paying taxes, but so their money was.
They decided excluded.
Hold on.
You just said Black people.
Listen.
That proves my point.
Listen. No, saying the word Black does not prove your
point.
You said
Black people were excluded.
Listen. Hold up. So what I was talking, let me make my point. So what I'm talking, so you have all of these instances with Social Security, with the Federal Housing Authority, with like the whole New Deal, like Blacks were completely excluded from. So there was a hand that was dealt it was fixed from the outcome. And now midway through the game, they're saying we agreed that we're not going to cheat anymore, but I still got a fixed hand. So changing the rules midway through is not going to change the fact that my hands was messed up from the beginning. So that's the problems that we got to address.
Prove my point. You said Black people were excluded.
Yes,
in order for something to be systemic.
Hold on, no. Hold on. No. You gotta listen to the point. All right. So the policies that came from like the Federal Housing Authority, that laid the groundwork for systemic racism. So think about this. Black people being forbidden from buying homes that they could easily afford, right? So now they're moved into the ghettos and stuff, right? Okay, so how are schools paid for? Is it through property taxes that come from houses? Okay, so now Blacks are going to get poor school systems because of that, right? So desegregating it doesn't matter because the public school system, you're going to go to the school that's in your zip code, right? So what type of wealth? So the wealth that Blacks were completely prohibited from getting, right? Determine what type of school they will go to, which would determine what type of education system to go to, which later determine the life they're going to have. Like as other opportunities, like with education, with wealth, etc. So like it's like you're saying that because like you had a hand that was fixed from the beginning, and you're saying midway through the game that since the dealer said he's not going to cheat anymore, now it's even. Like that's just total nonsense.
No, I think we both agree right now from what you just said.
Okay, so here
but let me tell you why. Let me tell you why though.
Okay, no, hold on.
Because you just stated a bunch of systemically racist things, which I agree with, and then you're saying that those systemically racist things had a causal relation to current discrimination, or well, not, I wouldn't say current discrimination. Basically, cause a causal chain of people who had less privilege. Is that okay? Does that suffice with what you were saying?
Well, I mean, sure.
But I'm just saying that today,
for instance, like we could talk about. So we could talk about like the drug war, right? For instance, right? It is fought most heavily, and it's my phone went off. So it's fought most heavily in Black communities, right? So that is a form of systemic racism. Like it doesn't have to be intentional. The people that could be fighting a drug war can have like the best intentions. We're just trying to get drugs off the street.
So if you want to redefine racism, that's fine. But I'm not redefining
it. I'm not redefining.
You cannot blame people. You cannot blame people. You know how harsh an accusation of racism is. That's an extremely harsh accusation.
Who am I accusing being racist?
You said if someone is policing a neighborhood that happens to be Black because of drugs, that they're racist. That's systemic racism.
Dude, that is okay. Hold on. Facade, Tyrell, did I say anything like that? That is total nonsense.
Yeah, I don't know where you got that from.
Yeah,
he said the war on drugs tends to be judged more, or tends to be carried out more harshly in black communities. That
Yeah,
is
so how
not
is that
saying that
racist?
policing black
Yes.
communities for drugs makes you a
Yes.
racist.
So,
I was
war on
saying the
drugs.
police can have the best intentions. They don't have to be racist, but they're taking part in a drug war, which is a form of systemic racism.
What? No, because in the
So,
systemic
hold on,
piece,
so it's very. So
why do you think the people who wrote the law?
Hold on. So when we talk about a law being racist and the agent, like a person being racist, is very different because an agent requires intentionality when we're talking about race. That is not what we're talking about law, because it wrong.
I disagree with you. In order for a law to be racist, it has to be racist. It has to either explicitly say it, or you have to prove that the agent who wrote the law was being racist,
or that it has has consequences that are negatively impacting a specific race.
No, that's disproportionality. That has nothing to do with racism.
So if I read a law that disproportionately impacts black people to white people, it's not a racist law. It just happens to be that way.
Absolutely not. There's tons of policies and laws that disproportionately affect certain groups of people that happen to be a certain color. That doesn't mean that the person who wrote it.
Can you give me an
example? We're not talking about the person. We're talking about the law.
Can you give me an example of a law that disproportionately affects white people?
Legislators.
Where does the law come from? Does it come from the ether?
Yeah, it comes from
no one has a problem with where law comes from, bruh. I'm asking. Can you give me a specific pause? Can you give me a specific example of a law which disproportionately targets white people? I will give you as much time as you need, as long as you don't come back with saying something like, "I know what color school buses are."
I can tell you I can tell you the ones that have come up recently because there's lawsuits. Specifically, one for the federal government.
I'm not asking for a lawsuit. I'm asking for a law that disproportionately
it doesn't matter. Law or policy. Right?
Okay, can you give me a law?
Yes,
no, I'm
not asking about a lawsuit. I'm asking about a law.
He asked for one thing. You said like, no, I'm gonna give you something else.
Well, no, I mean,
I'm asking for a law. Like, for instance, like a law that disproportionately attacked people of color in the United States was the war on drugs.
It's not attack. It's attacking. Sounds like the person who wrote it intended to like demonize and degrade a certain group of people. No, we have a different definition. Do you like that better? It's that simple. We have a different definition. You're talking about.
Do you like the term impacted better? By the way, I'm not going to let you wiggle out of this one. I'm going back to this. Before you continue, I want you to give me an example of a law that disproportionately impacts white people. Name one in the past 100 years.
If you don't know, you can just say no. We can just move on.
I'm thinking. I mean, I'll give it a try.
Because I can think of some that disproportionately impact people of color. I can think of ones that disproportionately attack Native Americans. I can think of ones that disproportionately attack Hispanic Americans.
Yeah, but
I cannot think of one that has ever impacted white people.
But if you want to be consistent and be, to me, it's a matter of just like legal principle, right? I understand you want to target, white people because white people wrote the law that happened to disproportionately affect a minority. I understand that, and I have empathy for that. I'm not saying I don't, but I'm saying that if we want a legal precedence here, if we want legal principle, you can't just make an accusation and just say because it's disproportionate that it happens to be racist. So, I mean, let me think real quick of disproportionate laws that would happen to affect white people.
Hey, Morpheus, are you familiar with the war on drugs?
Yes, yeah, I'm familiar.
I mean, are you familiar with the crack epidemic?
Crack epidemic, the CIA,
100-to-1 ratio.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the difference in the laws with crack and cocaine?
Yes, correct. I am. Yeah, no, I'm on board with you guys. Trust me.
Okay,
you guys think I'm oblivious to this stuff. I do, but it's a matter of principle.
Do you think that was systemic racism?
So I think that the law. Let me think. This is a tough one for me because like
it shouldn't be because if you're saying it requires intentionality.
Let me tell you why. Hey, because there's a lot of people that think like me, right? I'm not the only person.
Sure.
And we could be wrong, of course, right? We're not all perfect. The issue I have here is that the law itself was you could probably find even black people that voted, right, to put the law in place. It's like the 1998 crime bill, right? Something like that.
Yep.
You guys can quote me on that.
And I can show you black people that was whipping slaves who ran away and stuff.
Yeah,
I was just about to say that.
That doesn't prove
Yeah.
anything. But then,
Okay.
it's one of those
All right.
things where it's like maybe they just thought that crack was bad, and it just happened to be that most people who use crack were black
So
people.
here's the hey Morpheus. So like
Do we
so
have to say that they
Mor-
thought that black people were inhuman or
no,
less
no,
than
no, no.
human?
More Morpheus. So I was trying to distinguish this from the beginning because look, we could say that the law is racist without the legislature having any sort of racist intent. Like that's not required. That's what I was saying. So because when we talk about an agent versus
That's
a law,
the difference between us. So we could be saying the same thing. Like I'm 100%
So
for like critical race theory when it comes to showing the disproportionate effect on a specific race. What
mhm.
I'm not for is saying that someone intentionally was racist in writing the law, because I don't know.
Well, I don't think anybody here was saying that. Like that could or could not be the
That's
case.
literally why we said a law that disproportionately targeted or impacted a race.
Yeah,
That's
but
how.
I wouldn't call that
when I say
racist.
that a law is racist, I'm not saying that a law has racist intent, or that a law
No.
has a will, or that a law
Or that
is.
a law
I mean,
was
like,
written by a
although there were
racist.
laws specifically geared towards specific races,
So okay,
I'm
that's a
saying that a
redefining
law
of terms.
is disproportionate to the race
Okay,
that it
then-
impacts in the way that it is written.
then
For instance,
we're,
like crack versus cocaine.
we're
That law
just talking about different
specifically
terms.
impacted
Then
certain people in a very particular way.
yeah, certain laws disproportionately affect other races. I would never argue against that, but I'm saying that to say it's systemic racism as if it's intentional to harm a race, that to me is I find that to be an inaccurate representation of the people
Okay.
who wrote the laws.
All right. Well,
Some of them probably were
I'm
racist.
sorry to cut you off, but I want to share something with you before you go any further. So a few years ago, maybe about 20 years ago, I was talking to a cousin of mine who has been in and out of jail. He was used to sell crack, and he came up during the crack epidemic, right? And that's when he started selling crack, right? He told me, I remember back then, and I thought that it was crazy when he first said it to me. He said to me, it was him and a couple other guys in this neighborhood that were approached by federal agents and told them, I will allow you to sell drugs in these neighborhoods. I'm going to allow it. Now, to me, at that point, it sounded crazy until I heard about other big time drug dealers whose names I'm not going to say, but big time drug dealers in Chicago, Detroit, LA, some of the places where the crack epidemic hit the hardest. They said the exact same thing. They were approached by federal agents, and a lot of them were given drugs to funnel into these neighborhoods. Now that sounds intentional to me.
No, I that doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, if you follow politics, even current politics, they do these things where they similar to entrapment. But the FBI has been known to be agents of provocateurs.
Not,
To
but you
include
know what? I'm sorry to cut you off again. Not just entrapment, but there's
an
a
agent
reason
of
that they're
provocateurs.
putting these drugs in these neighborhoods. It's not just to trap the people who are selling the drugs. It's to funnel these drugs into these neighborhoods for a reason.
Yeah, and so I mean, the question you'd have to ask, and this is the question I would ask, is first of all, why, right? Why is it that they're targeting black neighborhoods with crack? And I mean, there's all kinds of crazy corruption. I mean, I'm sure you've seen all the documentaries about the New York Five or whatever, Chicago, all these inner cities where they're funneling in crack. And there's corruption in there was corruption in the 20s and 30s with mobsters of all different races, and the FBI and well, FBI was created after, but and the local police. The question here is that a horrible and corrupt enterprise? The question is it because these people care about the race and they want to degrade the race? They think that you're dehuman or less than human, or is it because they have other incentives in mind? I know in the case of New York, most of the cops that were targeting black neighborhoods, um, and also pockets of the Italian mob, for instance, they're in it for the money. You know what I mean? There was no like conspiracy theory against black people or conspiracy theories against the mob. It's just what I'm saying is that certain values or certain drives coalesce and come into being, and it happens to be exploiting. And they might exploit black people because they have less resources, right? They
So
might exploit black
see
people
that
in New
they
York.
felt that they could make more money off of selling crack to black people than they could off of selling money.
No, that
white
they
people.
were safer. Like I'm saying, like when you look at someone's intentions, if you look at like their motives strategically, maybe they were like, hey, if I go into a white neighborhood, I'm going to be I'm going to be at much higher risk. I need to go into a black neighborhood where there's less resources and you know there's it's easier to blame black people you know, because of the culture at the time, for instance. And you know and there, I'm just saying that there's a lot of ways there's a lot of intentions behind that. Those people could be like, you know what, black people, they can do anything I can do. But right now, they're lower in class and structure, or they're lower in power. You see that in white neighborhoods. I mean, the police aren't going to go to the white suburbs to freaking to do the meth deals, right? They're going to go to the trailers, and they're going to you know, either plant meth or they're going to make deal. It's just a common trend. It doesn't matter what race you are. They're going to go to the poorer inner cities or the trailer parks or what have you
Well, what
to
about
do
with
the
cocaine?
bidding.
Because cocaine
And
is a
who?
very
That's a good point.
expensive habit.
No, that's a good
And
point.
you
Yeah,
don't want to go to the lower income neighborhoods try to get
exactly.
the cocaine off. You want to go to the people who have money.
And so the people who wrote that bill were probably like, "Hey, these people who do cocaine are affluent. They're higher society, right? They're the higher class income. These are the freaking the Wall Street bulls. These are the, you know, Hollywood folks. We don't want to fuck with them, right? Because it's harder. It's gonna be a greater risk for us." And that's just one example of an explanation that has nothing to do with just racism in general. I mean, it sounds racist, but again, when I opened up this discussion, I said race is one variable. We have to consider all the variables. We didn't even talk about class, right? Class is a huge deal. I mean, there's tons of white people that have a lower class than black people that have a higher class that are at a disadvantage just because they're poor and they're in shitty schools and they're in shitty neighborhoods. You know, that's still a reality. And there are lots of black people that are in positions where they're at a disadvantage because they're in a rough neighborhood. It's poor. There's no property tax for schools, and that's a reality.
But it has
But
nothing to do with race, though. That's what you're saying.
well, I would say in
Are you
America,
saying that, like, after slavery was abolished, racism was abolished?
so this would be my observation. The effects of slavery in the African American community in the United States have echoed, right? They've echoed into our current, let's say, our current society, and you can see that in certain situations. But to say that it's the only variable that matters in looking at the African American community it would be um, you know, a mistake. I think that when you look at redlining, for instance, you look at the way that ghettos were set up and the way that the Black Wall Street was torn down and pushed out, and when you look at the treatment of black people over time, obviously historically you guys have had a complete disadvantage, and anyone to deny that is not being an honest person. But at some point, we have to look at society and say, how are we really being systemically discriminatory towards black people? And to what degree are there other variables at play that have to
I,
do
I, I
outside of color?
that's what I'm saying,
That
and I
yeah,
can give you that. That's what I'm saying. So like all of those policies, right? With the redlining, with the GI Bill, with Social Security, with the whole no deal, that blacks were completely, you know, prohibited from
but
participating
there was
in.
white
So
neighborhoods too that were redlined. It wasn't just black neighborhoods.
they were redlining big. So here's the thing.
It
So
was
like
poor
no
people. It
no no
was
no no
more
no no no,
class.
not really. So let's here's the thing. So like if
We don't
like
want to
if
talk about that.
no, we can't talk about it. I was gonna like explain that to you. So the way that worked was like, so you had to have a certain credit score in order to get your get a mortgage at a certain rate. However, if there was a black person living in that neighborhood, it'd just be totally redline, period. And so now they have to get rid of the black person, or nobody is in it, or nobody's eligible, right? So that's what was going on. No, so we're talking about, so all of those racist policies that were going on for like nearly a century, like the whole New Deal. Because remember, the only reason the New Deal happened, right, because of the Great Depression, and everybody was poor, right, equally. Right. So the New Deal comes along, black people can't participate virtually. And so now all the benefits that families got from the New Deal, mainly like buying these homes, right, for really cheap rates that are now worth 5 or 6 times more 20 years later, which guarantees generational wealth. Blacks are completely blacks hardly had any part in that. And so now here we are. Right now here we are in a supposedly more equitable society, but blacks are at a disadvantage, right? Because of the wealth that they were cheated out from the outset. So that's what I'm saying. So like this is what I was talking about. So imagine a dealer, right? He fixed the deck. He give you a bad hand on purpose, right? And now while you're trying to play this game with this bad hand, the dealer tells you, I'm not going to cheat anymore.
Yeah, but you're looking at
now try to win the game. Listen, but it was fixed from the outset. That's what I was saying.
Yeah,
so go ahead.
Well, so you're looking at one slice of the pie, right? There are tons of people that get what's the best word for it? They get an unfair deal over time. Now, there's a large portion, and these are like points that you're bringing up. There's a large portion of people that weren't given real estate assets that they should have qualified for. At the time,
and they weren't given it to them because they were black. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, sure.
It's because they were black.
Okay,
it's very different. Yeah.
That's a good point. Yes, you're correct in that, and I'm not going to sit here and say otherwise. But I already said, like, the real question is not, was there historic discrimination and systemic racism which has led to a current society which in part is what's the best word for it? There's in part is
it's just like it's residual effects.
Yeah, residual effects. I agree with that.
Cool. But so those residual effects, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I call systemic racism. Like the facts that these really bad schools.
I don't think
it's mostly blacks going to them. This goes back to
conservatives
redlining.
But conservatives wouldn't disagree with you there. I think most conservatives,
I have a lot of conservative friends, and they say stuff like systemic racism doesn't exist.
Let me tell you why they say that. Because their literal definition is that there's a law on the books today. Now, for me, I would never say that there was not systemic racism in the past that led to certain inequalities today. That's just a fact, and I would never dispute that. But we have to move past that, and I think that's kind of the point. That's where the conservatives have issues. Is
what do you mean by move past? Like, so like if I'm
what
the
I'm
dealer,
saying is that
I gave you the fixed hand. You got to move past it, man.
Because we all deal with inequalities in our lives. No one's perfect. No one, so not even perfect. No. Hear me out.
All right.
I understand. You might have got screwed over. Let's just say your grandpa, right? It's 1950, 1940. He got screwed over, right?
Yep. He can afford a home, but he can't buy it.
Yeah, well, my grandpa happened to be Chinese or Native American. In fact, my grandpa, I'm part Cherokee Indian, right? So, but then you have other people who are Chinese. They died on the railroads. They didn't even have a chance to get a house. Native American died on the trail. There's so many different inequalities and injustices in America that exist. To me, it's like to just paint the picture that it's just one and that no one else suffered.
I don't think anybody said that. I said no. You're shadow boxing. So I never said that. I never said that blacks were the only ones that face discrimination.
You didn't. But what I'm saying is that to bring it up as if it's
well, I'm not. So we were just talking about. I can only talk about one at a time, right? I got one mouth, right? So I could talk about other forms of of systemic racism. But I was talking about the
but
black.
yes, but the point the point that follows from that is
Mhm.
here we are, we're in 2023, right?
Yep.
What are we going to do about our injustices in the past? The freaking Japanese, the
Mhm.
Chinese who worked the railroads, the Japanese who were incarcerated during
Well,
World War II,
I mean,
the
sure.
slave trade, the you know
Well,
the
I
Irish
don't.
and the Italians. I mean the
Yeah,
Jews. I mean
sure.
we've all
Hold on.
got issues.
Yeah,
But
you can't right all the wrongs, right? But
no,
okay, but inability
but
to right all the
when someone
wrongs
says
is
systemic
not a
racism,
reason to ignore all of them.
but
Like,
it's like we're ignoring society today. It's as if we don't watch
no,
news every day.
I'm
Everyone
not.
talks about systemic racism today. Not from 1950, not from 1930. They're saying today systemic racism.
Yes, well, that's what I was talking about. When we talk
Or
about the bad,
systemic
no,
racism, sorry. Systemic
yeah, that's
racism.
what I was talking about. So we talk about the bad.
Today.
Yes, today in January January 17th, 2023, right? Today you have systemic racism. When we talk about the blacks
But
being
all
huddled
you're
into these
saying to
bad,
me,
no, stop and huddled in these really bad schools. This all goes all the way back to redlining. Right?
no,
Because how do schools get their funding? Through property taxes, right? How much taxes can they get from property taxes? It depends on the value of the property. If you were prohibited from getting that property in the first place, you're going to have a bad school. Which means now you're going to be likely to end up on the streets.
so there's no other variables that
So
contribute. It's just race.
now we have heavy policing. No, you shadow box. I never said just race. I don't know where you keep getting these made up arguments from, because I never said these things, man.
Well, because
But
you're talking about systemic racism. We're talking about race.
So, but when did what sentence did I say in the last 5 minutes to say that race is the only thing that matters?
Zero.
Hey guys, hold on. Before we go any
Okay.
further, unfortunately, I got to log off here because I got to prepare for another podcast.
Okay.
It's been great conversation. Tribulate, fantastic facade. I will talk to y'all later. Morefreus, it was good meeting you. Good conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, y'all keep up that great work, and I will talk to y'all later.
I appreciate it, guys.
All right, man.
Yeah, I should probably log off some too.
Yeah, I was going to say we go ahead and give him the last word.
Yeah, I just wanted to change over so we didn't accidentally dox Morefreus. So I currently have the Relic Media page up. If anyone's watching live and you're confused as to why, I didn't want to dox Morefreus, so that's what's happening right now. I'm going to adjust the screen accordingly, and then I'll let you go into the last word if you'd like.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
No, I these conversations are important just because I continue to learn. It's not just me; it's hopefully people who listen in the future continue to learn, because I'm not the only one who has these kind of thoughts and stuff like that. I think it's in large part it's just a matter of definition and the severity of the effects of current law and policy, and but I have a deep appreciation for the African American community. I studied their music in college. I have a bachelor's of fine arts in jazz and jazz theory and performance. So studied all the great African American musicians. But besides that point, the point I'm trying to make is
You studied Tupac?
What was that?
You studied Tupac?
I didn't study Tupac.
Well, you didn't study all the great Black American musicians.
Well, no. I'm talking from the jazz idiom. So in the jazz idiom,
No, I'm messing.
Jazz is one of the essential African American art forms that was created by African Americans in the United States. So, anyway, it was me paying homage to those folks. But anyway, great conversation. Hopefully, no one found this offensive tonight.
No, that didn't happen. I'm sure
plenty
of people did.
Yeah, but I think
that's
it's just a good conversation to have.
That's what this show. That's what the show's about. Yeah, we want to talk about stuff that people are afraid to talk about. So
good point. Because I was a little afraid, but at the same time,
I'm anybody that watched this, I'm pretty sure they're going to get offended by something that one of us said. Probably several things, but it's all good.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hey, appreciate you coming on, Morefreus. So we hope to have you back on again sometime.
I would be very happy and appreciative. Thank you.
Most definitely.
All right, let's get to this wrap-up screen.
Yep.
One thing I
So,
wanted to address real quick while we still had a couple minutes, or well, I'll take a couple minutes to address it real quick, is just a big thanks, shout out to Morpheus for coming on the show. Big thanks to TJ for coming on the show. Really appreciate it because, without a guest, it makes it a little more boring,
mhm.
And it's something that we want to keep interesting, but also it's something I wanted to bring up in the potential for future episodes. And what I mean by that is, would you guys be more inclined to watch some shows that were in shorter segments? So, not necessarily full on debates like the one we did tonight, but more like 5 to 10 minute segments, maybe with a guest involved, or maybe just Triple A and I kind of wrapping up and summing up an argument against a particular topic or for a particular topic. Because we've been trying to find a way to just kind of reach some more people and kind of broaden our horizons and grow the channel a little bit. So if you have any comments, questions, concerns, feedback, anything you'd like us to take on, anything you'd like to see from us specifically, feel free to shoot us an email, send us a message, give us a comment. Do something, reach out to us. Next week, I don't think we have a scheduled guest, so if you're interested in coming on the show, Christ Brings a Sword been remarkably quiet.
Yeah,
Since,
come back on.
Yeah, he come on anytime
You never
you want.
emailed us, man.
Never
We had
emailed us.
Wesley on last week.
Had Wesley
so,
on, go watch it. Not once did we mute the guy. Not
Nope.
once.
Never.
So can't even say that we did that. Can't even say that we would do that or drop the call. We definitely had him on the whole time. We let him speak his piece. And we would do the same for you. Now, a conversation might go similarly, where we might just spin wheels for a bit, but I mean, I'm okay with that. I'm not saying we have all the answers, that you'll have all the answers, or that either of us are going to change each other's minds. But we're also going to be reaching out to some additional YouTubers, some content creators and whatnot, try to get some additional guests on. It's not that we don't appreciate Morefreus for coming on. It's just that we don't want to, keep pounding the same guest over and over again. If we can get different guests in. The other thing I wanted to bring back up is initially when we created the show is we talked about doing call-ins and just taking on maybe some more rapid-fire questions and discussions. If that's something you guys want to see, please reach out to us, let us know, because we do have an active call-in line that we can incorporate into this. Won't cost anything. We'll have it up on the screen. And just like with our guest, we try to make it as easy as possible. So it's literally just a number you can call from any phone. With our guest, we just send you a link. Try to make it as easy as possible to get on. Otherwise, we should see you next week. We may be doing something very special depending on if we get another guest or not in that time frame. But other than that, was there anything you wanted to add, Triple A, before we head out?
That's all, folks.
That's all.